What if the quiet librarian everyone ignored was hiding the most powerful kind of love imaginable? What if the woman others whispered about, mocked for living alone, for adopting troubled kids, was actually the one holding together a family that fate had almost shattered? Claire Morgan never wanted attention. She lived simply, spoke softly, and poured her heart into books in solitude. But everything changed the night she saw two forgotten children on a TV screen. Children with eyes too old for their years, abandoned by everyone, except her. What started as an act of compassion became a storm of judgment, sacrifice, and unimaginable courage. And just when the world began to accept her, a man from the shadows appeared. A man with a truth that could either destroy everything or bring the healing none of them knew they needed. Who was he? Why now? And could Claire protect the only family she ever had? Stay until the end, because this story isn't just about adoption. It's about redemption, love stronger than blood, and a final goodbye that will leave you in tears. Let's begin the final chapter of Claire's journey and discover what it truly means to be a mother. Claire Dawson had built her life around silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't scream loneliness. It whispered it gently, persistently. After her husband's betrayal and a bitter divorce, Claire sought refuge in the quiet corners of Maplewood Public Library, where the smell of old paper and the hushed rustle of pages became her new symphony. She was 36, childless, and spent her evenings in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, warming up soup and rereading old novels until her eyes blurred. Her neighbors found her strange, co-workers labeled her distant. Her hair was always tied in a neat bun, and she wore cardigans that hadn't changed style since college. But what they didn't see was the strength that lived under her reserved demeanor, steel forged in heartbreak, in solitude. Then came the night everything changed. It was raining, the kind of gentle drizzle that tapped on the window like it had something to say. Claire turned on the TV to drown the sound of her own heartbeat, expecting nothing. But the screen flickered to a segment on St. Jude's orphanage in Boston. The camera panned across gray hallways and bunk beds lined like soldiers. In a dimly lit corner, two children sat quietly. A boy, around 5, clenching a worn-out teddy bear with one ear missing, and a girl with messy braids and eyes so wide, so lost, it felt like they were searching through the lens. The narrator's voice was soft but heavy. Noah and Lily lost their mother to a terminal illness. Their father had disappeared years earlier. They've been waiting for someone. Claire's hand trembled around her mug. She couldn't breathe. Something about those kids hit her in a place she didn't know still existed. Their small fists, their hollow stares, their silent, unconscious plea. The girl clutched an old handkerchief like it was all she had left in the world. And then, like a voice had whispered through the static, "They're yours." That night, Claire didn't sleep. At dawn, she sat at her kitchen table, a piece of paper clutched in her hand, the number for Child Protective Services. Her voice shook when she made the call. "Hi, I'd like to ask about adopting 2 children." Thus began the grueling process. Interviews, background checks, home visits. One caseworker looked her straight in the eye and asked, "Do you really think you're capable? You're single, a librarian. You know these kids come with trauma, right?" Claire nodded. "Yes," she said quietly, "but I won't let them go through this alone." 2 long months passed. Whispers spread in her building. "She's taking in orphans? At her age?" One neighbor scoffed. "She couldn't even keep her husband." Even her colleagues raised eyebrows. "Claire, are you sure about this?" asked Linda from the front desk. "You barely speak to anyone." But Claire didn't need anyone's approval. What she felt wasn't logic. It was something ancient and maternal, clawing its way to the surface. Then came the call. "Miss Dawson, Noah and Lily are ready to meet you." She dropped the phone. That evening, she walked into the orphanage, her palms sweating. The children were smaller than she imagined. Noah didn't meet her eyes, and Lily held her stuffed animal so tightly it looked like it might tear. Their first night together was silent. Noah sat in a corner, eyes on the floor. Lily cried into her blanket. Claire didn't sleep, only sat at the edge of their beds whispering, "It's okay, you're safe now." Days turned into weeks. Claire learned what they liked. Mac and cheese for Noah, sliced apples with cinnamon for Lily. She read them bedtime stories with a trembling voice, slowly growing steadier as the children started leaning into her touch, resting their heads on her shoulders. But not everyone was ready to accept them. "She's crazy taking in those kids," mumbled Mrs. Henderson from across the hall. "Why now? What's she trying to prove?" At the preschool, other parents whispered behind her back, "Those kids are damaged. Did you hear what happened to their real parents?" Claire heard it all, but every night she tucked Noah and Lily in and whispered the same words, "I'm not going anywhere." Still, the children were not without scars. Noah often refused to speak, staring at the walls like he was waiting for someone who never came. Lily jumped at sudden noises and clung to Claire's legs if a stranger entered the house. Then one night, Claire overheard something that made her blood run cold. "I think Grandpa's going to find us soon," Lily whispered to Noah. Claire's heart skipped. Grandpa? The next day, a black SUV with tinted windows stopped in front of her apartment. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. His eyes were tired, his voice low. "I'm George Walker," he said. "I'm their grandfather." Claire froze, cup of tea trembling in her hands. The man didn't barge in. He sat down slowly, looking at her, then at the children's drawings on the wall. "I didn't know," he whispered. "About my son, about the children. I only found out through a foundation report and that news segment. I thought my son was gone for good." Claire didn't respond. Her world tilted. She looked at the man again. Behind the gray hair and worn eyes, there was something familiar, something Noah had. George reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden crane, weathered and fragile. "Daniel, my son, used to make these when he was a boy, just like the one Noah held on TV." Claire didn't know what to say. The man looked up, tears glistening. "I'm not here to take them away. I want to be a part of their lives, if you'll let me." And in that moment, the silence that had once defined Claire's life cracked open. Was this the beginning of something new, or the start of another heartbreak? Thank you for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we would love to hear your feedback so we can improve in future videos. Do you think Claire should trust George so easily, or keep her guard up a little longer? What would you have done in Claire's place? Adopt the twins or stay in your comfort zone? Do you believe children like Noah and Lily can ever truly heal from their early trauma? If you felt connected to Claire's decision, comment with 100 below. Where are you watching from? Let us know your country in the comments. Claire watched George Walker sip the lukewarm tea she'd nervously poured him, her eyes never leaving the quiet man whose sudden appearance had cracked her fragile sense of calm. Noah and Lily sat on the carpet nearby, quietly arranging toy blocks, unaware of the storm swirling between the adults. "I lost Daniel long before he ever disappeared," George said, his voice barely a whisper. "I raised him alone after his mother died. I was too hard on him, too proud. When he turned 19, we had a fight. I told him to leave if he couldn't live by my rules. He did, and never came back." Claire's throat tightened. She didn't interrupt. "I tried to find him. Years later, I learned he'd married, had children, then lost everything. I didn't even know they existed until I saw that broadcast." He looked over at Noah, who was now quietly building a tower with intense focus, and Claire saw it. The same determined brow, the same proud chin. "I'm not asking for custody," George said gently, "just a chance to be part of their lives." Claire said nothing that day. She needed time. But that night, after the kids were tucked in, she stood in the hallway, watching them sleep. Noah's hand curled protectively around his stuffed bear, Lily murmuring in her dreams. She remembered the night they came home, how broken they'd seemed, and how far they'd come. Could she risk that progress now? The next morning, she called the family therapist. "I need help navigating this." Sessions began, first for Claire and the children, then with George included. He was patient, never overstepping. He brought hand-carved toys from his wood shop, told stories of Daniel as a boy. Slowly, Noah started asking questions. Lily drew pictures of a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. One evening, George brought a photo. A young Daniel, smiling, sun-kissed, holding a wooden airplane. Noah stared at it for a long time, then asked, "Was that really my dad?" George nodded. He loved planes. He used to say he'd build one someday and fly across the world. Noah's eyes lit up in a way Claire hadn't seen before, Something inside him had started to click, but not everyone was so accepting. One afternoon at the playground, Claire overheard two mothers whispering, "Those aren't even her real kids, you know." And now some strange old man shows up? Who even is he? Claire held back tears. She was used to judgment, but this stung more than usual. The whispers followed her all the way home. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of legal documents she hadn't dared file yet. Official adoption paperwork. Her pen hovered above the signature line. She thought of all the nights she'd held Lily after nightmares, all the times Noah refused to speak, but let her hold his hand anyway. And then she thought of George. Could they be a family, all of them? The next week, Lily had her first school performance, a fall recital. She was dressed in a little yellow dress Claire had found at a thrift store, her curls tied up with blue ribbons. Claire sat in the front row, heart pounding. George came too. He brought flowers. When Lily stepped onto the stage, she froze. Her eyes searched the crowd, wide and frightened. She spotted Claire, then George. She smiled. Her voice trembled, but she sang every word. When it ended, applause erupted. Claire stood, clapping through her tears. George wiped his eyes with a folded handkerchief. And for the first time, Lily ran, not to Claire, not to her classmates, but to George. "Grandpa, did you like it?" George knelt, stunned. "Sweetheart, it was perfect." Claire stood back, hand over her mouth, watching them hug. Her heart ached with something she hadn't expected. Joy. But just as things began to settle, a letter arrived. Claire opened it with trembling hands. It was from a lawyer, a woman named Janice Grant, claiming to be Daniel's ex-partner's sister, Lily and Noah's biological aunt. She wanted custody. The letter claimed Claire wasn't a real parent, that she had no legal right to keep the kids, and that George, as Daniel's father, should support the claim. Claire felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. That night she couldn't sleep. All she could see were flashing headlines. Librarian loses custody of adopted twins. She imagined Lily sobbing, being dragged away by strangers. Noah retreating into his silence once more. She called George. "I didn't know about her," he said immediately, voice shaking. "But Claire, if you want to fight this, I'll be by your side." The legal battle began. Weeks turned into months. Every night, Claire came home exhausted from meetings with social workers, lawyers, and child psychologists. But she never showed it. Not to the kids. They needed to believe she was their rock. The final hearing was set for December. Snow had begun to fall. Claire stood outside the courthouse, clutching a photograph of the three of them on their first Christmas together. Inside, the judge asked questions about her income, her single status, her lack of blood relation. And then George stood up. He told the court everything, about his mistakes, about how he'd failed his son, about how Claire had saved not just the children, but him. "She's more of a parent than most people ever get," he said, voice cracking. "She didn't just give them a roof, she gave them hope, stability, and love." The courtroom was silent. Claire closed her eyes. The judge leaned forward. "We'll render a decision next week." That night, Claire didn't cry. She curled up between Lily and Noah on the couch, reading Goodnight Moon for the 100th time. George sat nearby, sipping tea, silent. In that moment, the fight didn't matter. They were already a family. But will the law agree? We'll soon find out. Thank you for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we would love to hear your feedback so we can improve in future videos. What would you do if someone tried to take away the children you raised with your heart? Do you believe love alone is enough to make someone a parent? And most importantly, should George be considered family, even though he wasn't there when it mattered most? If you believe in Claire's love for these children, comment family below. Tell us where you're watching from. And a week passed like a year. Claire couldn't eat, could barely sleep. Every knock on the door, every email notification sent her heart into her throat. She tried to keep things normal for the kids, baking cookies with Lily, helping Noah with his science project, but even they could sense it. The tension in the air was too thick to hide. George came by every evening. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. His quiet presence had become her anchor. Finally, the call came. Claire stood frozen as the caseworker's voice echoed through the phone. "The judge has ruled in your favor." Her knees gave out. She sank to the floor, tears spilling freely. The children were hers, legally, officially, forever. She picked up the photo of her and the twins, taken during their first spring picnic. They'd smiled so wide that day, the kind of smile only safety can bring. But even in that joy, there was one more thing she had to do. She turned to George, and who had tears in his own eyes. "I want to make it official," she said. "They already call you Grandpa. Let's make it real." The next week they stood in the same courthouse, this time not to fight for family, but to seal it. George Walker legally adopted Noah and Lily as his grandchildren. He cried through the entire ceremony. That winter, Claire took time off from work. The four of them decorated a real Christmas tree together. Noah strung the lights, Lily carefully placed ornaments, George played old jazz records while sipping hot cocoa. On Christmas Eve, the kids gave Claire a homemade card. It read, "You are our forever mom." She didn't need any other gift, but life didn't pause after court victories or holidays. Spring came. The kids thrived in school. Claire returned to the library where her co-workers greeted her with hugs and homemade brownies. Even the neighbors who once whispered now offered warm smiles, asking, "How are the kids doing?" But one evening changed everything. Again. Noah had been quiet that day. Claire found him in his room, sitting on the floor with the old photo of his father. "He was like me, right?" he asked softly. She sat beside him. "In so many ways." "Then, why did he leave us?" Claire hesitated. This was a moment she couldn't mess up. Sometimes people carry pain so heavy, they forget how to hold on to the people they love, she said gently. "But that doesn't mean they didn't love you." Noah looked up. "But you held on." Claire's heart shattered. She pulled him into a hug, holding on tighter than ever. Summer came, and George's health began to decline. He moved slower, his laugh raspier, his hands shakier. But he still showed up for every school recital, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. One night, while Lily read him a story, he fell asleep in the recliner and never woke up. Claire found him the next morning, peaceful, a small smile on his face. The loss was devastating, but this time, they weren't alone in their grief. The community that once doubted her came forward. Neighbors brought meals, co-workers took over her shifts, Noah's teacher sent flowers. The very people who once judged her now held her up. At the funeral, Lily stood by the casket and read a poem she'd written. "He wasn't there when we were born, but he came when we needed him most. He built us paper airplanes and love we could never lose." Claire placed an old photo of George and the kids in the casket, along with a tiny hand-carved wooden plane he made for Noah. Years passed. Claire never remarried. She didn't need to. Her life was full. Noah graduated high school with honors and earned a scholarship for engineering. Lily, always the artist, opened her own studio downtown. Every fall, they planted an apple tree in George's memory. One evening, Claire sat in the garden, watching the wind rustle the leaves. She opened her journal. "Dear George, you didn't save them. You saved all of us." She closed the book and smiled, knowing that some families are chosen, not by birth, but by love, by sacrifice, by stepping up when no one else will. And maybe that's the truest kind of family of all. Now tell us, do you think Claire made the right choice in trusting George? Have you ever known someone who wasn't related by blood, but became your true family? If this story touched your heart, comment 100 below. If it made you think, drop a 2. And if you're still unsure, let us know with a 1. Also, what country are you watching from? Let's see how far this story of love and resilience reaches across the world. And don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to believe that family is not always about DNA. It's about showing up.